Get it? Because it's the last chapter. Hello, hooligans, and welcome back for some more Shelton Shenanigans. So we are here today to read chapter 19. Why is chapter 19 so exciting? Because like you heard in the intro, it is the final chapter. So this is the final chapter of the book, but this will not be the final video for the book because, again, just like we've been doing every Friday, I will read the in-between sections that have come in between chapters 16, 17, 18, and 19 in the video that will be after this one. So this is the last chapter, which is super exciting, which means we'll technically be done with the book. And then there will be only one more video to come. So let's go ahead and begin. Okay, so remember in chapter 18, Samuel's mom and dad and him had to leave Abner because it just wasn't safe anymore. And then they were told to go 3 or 4 hours to the west, and then when you found the swamp, go southwest, but that eventually they would be met with some redcoats. So the British, they weren't sure when. So they made it to the swamp, and then they kept going past there, and Samuel's mom told Samuel that it was like he was a new person, but that she loved this new Samuel. So here we are. Chapter 19. They slept fitfully that first night, especially Samuel. He could not get over the feeling that somebody was following them. The next day, the feeling abated somewhat, but by evening Samuel saw that his father was sliding back a bit. The food Emily had sent was good, but his father needed fat meat. Samuel decided to do a quick evening hunt for a raccoon. One shot, hopefully away to the west, was all he would allow himself. With luck, nobody would hear it. They were walking southwest in marshy country, which means it was like swampy. Perfect for raccoons, and he saw their tracks all over the place. He left the group resting and moved to the west an eighth of a mile. Walk hunting. He hadn't gone 50 yards before he saw a small female raccoon with 2 babies. That wasn't what he wanted, and so he kept going, out from her in circles. Within 20 minutes, he came on what he was looking for. A large boar raccoon halfway up a tall oak tree, sitting on the side of a branch. He moved east of the raccoon so that the sound would go west into the forest, aimed carefully, and took him in the head. So the animal fell backward off the limb, dead when he hit the ground. Samuel gutted him quickly and left the entrails for scavengers. Some people ate coon liver, he knew, and bear liver. Bear and raccoon meat were pretty similar, but he never trusted it. An old man had once told him, bear and raccoon livers will give you the gut gripes. So he stayed away from it. Back with the others, he skinned the raccoon, built a small, very small fire with the driest wood that he could find, and cooked the meat in about half-pound chunks. Fat dripping from it, he killed the fire as soon as the meat was cooked. He forced his father to eat several helpings of it. Then his mother and Annie ate until they were full. He saved the rest for his father to eat over the next 2 or 3 days. They wanted to talk then, especially Annie, who was nearly bursting. My talker is about to blow up, she told him, but he shook his head and wiped the grease off his mouth, took his rifle, and went back up the trail a quarter mile. He sat in a small stand of hazel brush next to the trail, dozing all night and watching. The sound of a gunshot worried him immensely, as did the smell of smoke from the fire. Even a soft breeze could carry the odor of the smoke for miles. But he needn't have worried. Nobody came along, and he went back to the family at dawn and awakened them. After letting them tend to themselves in the woods, since there were no privies, he started moving, again in silence. That day they stopped for breaks 4 times, and he forced his father to eat more raccoon. The rest of them ate the remainder of Emily's venison and corn dodgers. They started to hit cross trails about midday. There was still good forest all around them, and they walked in a beautiful green tunnel, although the trail seemed to get more beaten down as they moved southwest. Now and again they came across trails that ran east to west, and they went west each time. These trails were even more compacted, and twice they crossed over paths with twin ruts where the carts and wagons had moved through. These frightened Samuel. They were so wide and exposed that he was especially cautious in the way he let his family cross them. He stood and waited for 10, 20, 30 beats, listening, and then would send one person across at a run, waiting and listening for another long stretch before sending the next person, and the next, and then finally himself, which made it all the more difficult to believe when after all that care, he got caught. On day 4, he got caught. On day 4, even at the slow pace, Samuel thought they had made it close to 15 miles a day. They came into an area that seemed slightly more civilized. Forest still, but here and there a farm off to the east. They had to bear west to avoid the larger cleared areas. The cross trails were becoming more substantial as well, double-rutted roads appearing fairly often, and now and then proper roads, well-traveled, hand-graded, and planked over the muddy spots. They came on such a road near the end of the 4th day. It was sunny, although nearly evening, and they had relaxed, knowing they would soon stop for the night. Samuel came around a tight turn in the trail and stepped out onto a real road without thinking. He was 2 feet away from the rear of a British cavalry horse. Samuel froze. The man on the horse, an officer, was looking into the brush on the other side of the road, as was his horse, both ears cocked back. The officer had his right saber drawn, held at his side at a right angle, ready. To his left were 5 or more men on horses, all facing the same way. Staring intently, short muskets at the ready, their sabers were still in the holders. A second, too, they hadn't seen Samuel. The picture would be frozen in his mind for the rest of his life. A split second when everything was still, sane, controlled, nobody hurt, nobody dead, all sitting on their horses, all staring at the other side of the road, all alive, and then chaos. One man, young with rosy cheeks, caught sight of Samuel and turned. His mouth opened, he called, started to aim his musket at Samuel at the same instant that Samuel raised his rifle, cocking the hammer. But before he could shoot, the soldier could shoot, the officer wheeled his horse, which knocked Samuel away, and chopped his saber down at Samuel just as Samuel pulled the trigger on his rifle, aiming up at the officer. The ball taking the man just beneath the chin, killing him instantly as the saber barely caught the edge of Samuel's shoulder. Samuel fell back to see his father coming out of the woods to help him. "No," he said as the other soldiers swung their muskets around, when, like thunder, the very voice of the god of war gone mad, the other side of the road erupted in a shatter roar of flame and smoke. The men on the horses were blown off their mounts into the brush, dead by rebel fire. So a bunch of rebels, or a bunch of the people who were on the same side as Samuel, so that were against the British, came and they killed all of the British officers that were about to hurt Samuel and his family. 2 horses were hit, screaming, staggering back into the brush. Samuel leaned back on his father's arm and, without thinking, reloaded his gun. The rebels reloaded too and followed the redcoats off the road where they had fled and killed the wounded horses. So they only killed the wounded horses so that the horses wouldn't keep hurting. They obviously weren't killing the horses to be mean. Then silence as about 15 men came out of the brush and checked the British dead for papers. Samuel tried not to look at the officer that he had killed. As with the Indian, it had happened by reflex, so quick and so final. The death bothered him, but when he thought of that saber coming down at him, he knew that there had been no choice. A soldier in a blue continental uniform had come up to him. "Hi, I'm Sergeant Whitby. We're from the 13th Foot out of Philadelphia. And who are you?" Samuel pointed with a vague wave to his rear, where his mother and Annie came out of the brush to stand by his father. Samuel couldn't talk. He just kept staring at the dead officer whose hat had come off. The man had long brown hair that waved in the light breeze near the ground. It was almost like he was still alive. Samuel thought, like that part of him is still not dead somehow. Maybe I didn't really... He shuddered at the thought. Samuel's father cleared his throat. "We're refugees. We're trying to get to Philadelphia safely. My wife and I were prisoners in New York, and my son Samuel rescued us. This is our daughter, Annie. May we talk with you?" "Sir, we can do better than that." Sergeant Whitby turned to his troop. "Peters, Donaldson, gather up those 4 horses and put this man and his wife and the little girl on 3 horses, and all the rest of the equipment, muskets, sabers on the other. The rest of you get these bodies off the road." He turned back to Samuel's father. We were sent up to set up an ambush and take a prisoner or two to find out the situation in New York. Since you came from there, I'm going to consider the mission accomplished, and you can tell us what you know, and there's no reason you can't ride in comfort." He turned to Samuel, smiled, and said, "I take it you have no objections to walking?" Samuel shook his head, and then watched the soldiers drag the officers' bodies back to the brush with the rest, loaded the horses, and started back down the road toward safety. But Samuel hung back, leaning on his rifle, watching them until they were out of sight around a bend. It was over now, he knew. The run, the madness, listening to every crack of a twig, worrying over every brush of a leaf. His parents and Annie would be safe now. A great weight off of them came off of them then, and he thought, "No, we will be safe now. It's over." But he still hung there, hesitant to go, to follow, until a young soldier came back trotting and waved at him to come on. He nodded and picked up his rifle and jogged to catch up, and it was at that moment he knew that it was all over. So that is the end of chapter 19. There is a little epilogue. So this means like what happens after the whole setting in the book was done. So I'm going to quickly read that, and then all we will have to do in the next video is read the in-between sections. So keep listening, because this is where we find out information about what's happening to them now. Well, not now, but later on, after all of this chaos was over. So this is the epilogue. He stood leaning on his rifle on the high ground where he had first seen the smoke from the attack on the first settlement. 3 years had passed. They had settled in Philadelphia in safety. Their frontier would never be the same for his parents. The forest would always threaten them. So they had found a house, 2 stories of wood frame, among the many vacant houses in Philadelphia. Samuel's parents had started a school to take in and teach the many orphaned children of the war. Annie had become a great help, but Samuel had trouble fitting in. There was too much city, too much town, too many people for him to be able to feel settled and calm. And then there was that other thing that kept bothering him, the back trail. A few months in the city, he told his parents, "Everybody helped us. At great risk, they helped us. And they helped me. Everybody back there gave us everything they had. I have to go back there. I owe it to all of them." There were arguments, of course, almost outright fighting, and that went on for nearly 2 weeks. But in the end, surprisingly, it was his mother who stopped it. "No," she finally said, "he's right. He may only be 16, but age doesn't matter now. He's his own man, and if he feels that strongly, he must do it." And after that, he sat and talked with Annie and promised that he would come back for her, made a sacred promise that he would come back, and she agreed to stay and let him leave. He went back to the war. He worked his way up to Boston and joined Morgan's Rifles, where he also found Coop and some of the other men who had rescued him years before. He stayed with them for nearly 3 years. He saw fighting as he'd never seen it before, but he did not join in on the firing. Instead, he hunted for meat, fixed equipment, helped the sick and wounded as best he could. He stayed until Coop died, He stayed until Coop died over a split trench in an agony of jabbering delirium. Coop died by dehydration. That means that he obviously didn't get enough water. At the end, Coop didn't even know where he was, didn't even know his own name. That was when Samuel left. He went back, but not to Philadelphia, not yet. He went back to the healing forest, where it had all started for him, and where the war had nearly vanished by this time. He found the clearing in the woods that he had seen the first day, when he had gone so far from home hunting that bear. He stood there trying to make the last 3 years not have happened, thinking that at last it was over, but of course it wasn't finished. Philadelphia would briefly be taken by the British. Samuel's parents did not leave, though, but they stayed to help the children. but stayed to help the children. This time, oddly, the British treated them with great kindness, brought them food and blankets. Thousands more men would be killed, dying from bullets, bayonets, and sickness. The world would bring the war to the oceans, and the naval men would die horribly at sea. France would send troops to help the American colonies, getting so deeply involved that it would destroy the French economy, weaken the government, and contribute to causing the French Revolution, in which many of the leaders who had helped America would die, beheaded on guillotines. The madness didn't end there. Perhaps it never has ended. But for Samuel, it would come to a close in the soft beauty of the forest, the peace for him would hold on to forever. So, that is the end of the book. How exciting! So now all we have to do is read those in between sections, and then you will have officially read the entire Woods Runner book. So be sure to stay tuned for that next video. And as always, I love you, and go change the world.